Thank you all for coming again for day 2 of Avalanche Creates. My name is Dylan. So sorry for this presentation being a little on the late side. We had some technical difficulties. Our contract we're going to be showcasing was blacklisted by USDC, and Canva decided to stop working about 15 minutes before showtime. So let's do this. We're going to take a journey through token swaps. Quick agenda. We're going to go over why you might want token swaps, various ways to swap tokens through different mediums, and then finally a quick workshop to integrate a router. My name is Dylan. I'm co-founder and CTO at Node Finance. We traditionally use this space as our office. And Node Finance is a middleware company providing infrastructure for Web3 companies. I just recently graduated, so to start off on a light note, the first project I did was a stable swap exchange, and a community member made this meme because I would quite literally deploy new pools from class on my laptop. And that's me. I'd say my obsession is with efficient and performant systems. Our goal internally is to make it seem like every API request from the customer perspective happens client-side. We build React Native SDKs for mobile apps that bundle all together the DeFi primitives into one convenient SDK. We've held hackathons here before, and so we are very grateful for Avalanche to decide to use this venue. Thank you. So now diving into it, what exactly are token swaps? You could drastically increase the breadth of your cash in, cash out offerings if on the back end you are actually swapping into tokens that are more supported. So now we're going to actually go through how you might swap tokens, and it's going to kind of increase in complexity as we go along. The first one is through the Explorer. Now an Explorer like Snowtrace, when a contract is verified, you get this pretty neat UI to just easily interact with any of the functions. So here you would connect your wallet. You would approve the token amount. This is supposed to be a screenshot of the Snowtrace UI actually approving the token amount. You need to do this because you need to tell the token that you are approving the contract to spend it on your behalf. And then finally, you just call the function to swap tokens. The next one would be programmatically or through a script, like if you want to write your own custom UI. The first step here is to grab the contract ABI. If it's verified, this is pretty easy. You can just grab it directly from the Explorer. Otherwise, you're going to have to navigate to wherever the source code is and grab that little ABI object. And then from there, if you are using TypeScript, you can easily generate typings for that contract using some library like TypeChain. The first way you could use this to perform a swap, the very unsafe way, please do not do this, is to just set the minimum output amount to 0. This is basically saying no matter what, the trade's going to go through. The next way would be to query the chain for a quote. So here, obviously you can't see it, but what the code would be doing would be asking that pair for the actual quote of the swap, and then using that quote to set the minimum output amount based off some slippage amount. And this way is going to be fairly easy because you are relying on the chain to actually do the calculations. The downside here is the latency to get that quote back from the chain, whereas if you were to do it client side, it's going to be a lot faster. And so that's the advanced way would be to actually replicate that swap math via client side, so you can just quickly run new quotes client side without having to ask the chain for a quote. And then finally, you can take your quote and you can execute via the swap function. This one is just basically this little blurb right here, just calling the swap method. And now it's kind of a rest of the owl deal, but you can make a custom UI. It gets a bit easier than that, though. And now we're going to talk about swapping tokens through a router API. But what is a router? Has anybody used a router before? The problem you'll run into with trying to incorporate many exchanges is this idea of how much liquidity is out there. You could have some scenario where on one exchange you get a much better rate than on the other exchange, but in your application you don't want to have to worry about that. You just want to say, I want to buy this token, I have this token, tell me what to do. And that's what routers do. Routers are going to find the best trade route across the entire liquidity network on the chain, and they're going to tell you what your output is and how to get that output. Some very popular routers are 0x and 1-inch. Have you guys heard of those before? Show of hands. Awesome. And now, so swapping tokens through a router is pretty easy. For our example, we are going to use the Node Finance router, which is, we call it Minima. It's very similar to 0x or 1-inch. So from a basic perspective, you can just take all of the default configurations for whatever the API sets, based off of slippage, slippage tolerance, everything like that. So here, all that we needed is the input token, output token, input amount, and you just have to request the transaction. And once you get that transaction, all you have to do is sign it, and voila, the token swaps. The more intermediate way is to basically take more control. In the beginner route, if I go back to it, you are placing heavy trust on the entity that is actually giving you that transaction object. Especially if you don't check the transaction object, it could be something nefarious. So the more intermediate route would be to actually have more configuration and take the response from that router and use the contract API to actually just build your own transaction payload. That's exactly what this screenshot will be showing. However, swaps can be more than just token swaps. At Node, we have our indexer, and the very early version of it characterized a token swap simply as a token leaves your wallet and a token enters your wallet. And with that in mind, it's not just going from USDC to AVAX. It could be going from USDC to an LP position, between one LP position to another LP position, into liquid staking, and so on and so forth. And now most routers, they're more worried just about routing through DEXs. So you're not necessarily going to be able to go from an LP position to another LP position. Or if you want to go from a single token to an LP position, you have to swap into the underlying and then deposit. At Node, we have a convenient API for this called Minima, and it basically bundles all this together in single transactions. And Minima is fast, efficient. It's the everything router because it bundles swapping, deposits, withdrawals, liquid staking, et cetera, et cetera. Our latency is pretty low, consistently under 300 milliseconds. And in the workshop, we are going to go over the 0x integration. Like I said, USDC actually blacklisted our router contract, unfortunately. But before that, I'll hop into any questions.
Why are they blacklisted?
I have no idea. It is trying to figure that out. All right. So this is supposed to be a QR code. Okay, let's just...
You did great with illustrating missing pictures.
Ah,
QR codes really hard.
thank you. Let me just pull up the repo, and anybody interested, if you can read, the URL is github.com/node-fi/minima/workshop.
So if I have to summarize, so Minima is a router.
Yes.
So how is that different from like OX?
So it's different from 0x in the idea that it bundles together more than just DEX routing. So it also allows you to go from one single token to deposit it into an LP position. because it does view a token swap as more than just going through a DEX, but purely a token leaving your wallet and a token entering your wallet. And so from a customer perspective, what actually happens in between might not be as important. For example, so say you go from one token to an LP position, what Minima is going to do is it's going to calculate the most efficient route to the underlying tokens for the LP position, and then it's going to deposit into the LP position and return the LP token back to you, or also potentially deposit that into a farm and then return whatever representation of deposit receipt exists for that farm to you. Okay. Yes.
So I don't understand which part is like of Minima itself. On-chain, off-chain. Is it like 100% off-chain using the data from the chain, or is it some part on on-chain itself?
Yeah. Great questions. The question was what part of Minima is on-chain or off-chain? Most of the important aspects of Minima are actually off-chain, just for efficiency. So all of the route finding and everything like that is completely done off-chain through our API.
So it just gives me like information on the best route. It does not execute anything, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah. It tells you how to execute it, but it's not going to execute that for you. Okay. Any other questions before we dive into some code? All right, let's do it. So let's start from the beginning. I'll act like I am part of the workshop. Oh, you guys probably cannot see that. I'm just cloning the GitHub right now. And that's just git clone. Yeah. Yeah. So that's just git clone. And if you grab the URL from right here, you just hit copy that. And then go here and git clone. Paste that link in. So this is going to give you the minima-workshop directory. So we can just bear with me, I'm typing with one hand. All right. And so now just simply if you run traditional yarn, it'll handle all installation of dependencies. All right. And so workshop is going to be more of a walk through the code rather than strictly implementing it. An unfortunate aspect of the technical difficulties is I did go through and do a full implementation before this. Okay. So this is what you should see if you do have open in VS Code. You'll see here what we are mainly concerned with respect to routers are going to be traditionally if you were going to use the Minima router, as I said, we are not taking this route because of issues with USDC. But it would look something like this. So if you are familiar with React, we basically bundle up fetching the quote through a React hook. And so what this is doing is we just simply give the hook a input token, output token, the input amount. And here we go through and we parse the typed amount to the actual amount in way, and then pass that to the API. And the API, in turn, will give us an object that looks like this, right here, this router response. And so here's where we can see or the expected result, or expected output of this trade. We can see the actual address of the contract that will be facilitating this route. This would be the contract that you want to approve to spend your tokens. And then finally, we get the transaction object, which, as I pointed out in the beginner section, is what you could just sign and send, and it will perform the swap for you. But as I said, we had technical difficulties, so the actual workshop will be with 0x. The hook looks very, very similar. The only difference with the 0x really is just how their API is formatted. Still has the same general ideas in terms of give it the buy token, give it the sell token, buy amount, and it's going to tell you how much. All right. And really quick, we can see how these hooks are used if we go to the swap card. All right. Now here, if we go down here, what we essentially have is just grabbing very simple input from the user. So saying, give me the input token, give me the output token, give me the input amount, and I will tell you what your output is. And then once we do have a valid trade, if you look here, we will render the button that just submits that trade to the network. So now we can run this. You can run it just with yarn dev, and that'll start it up at your local host. Okay, is that big enough, or do we want it zoomed in a little bit? There we go. Okay, so here, let's say we want to go from, we're like Trader Joe, so we're bullish on AVAX, and we're going to go from USDC to wrapped AVAX. And we'll just buy $1 amount. And so this loading here is just the time it's taking to send that request to the API, 0x in this case, and for 0x to get back and tell us exactly how to perform this swap. And then we can hit swap, and MetaMask is going to ask us to approve our USDC. And this is saying the 0x router can transfer USDC on our behalf. And we have to wait for that approval to go through. And once it goes through, now we can actually execute the swap. And let's open up Snowtrace as well so we can actually inspect this transaction. Ah, we got a failure. Let's try that again. Just a second. Okay, here we go. That's the wrong account. So here we can see a very simple route, going from just one USDC to wrapped AVAX, but it did what it told us it would do. All right. I realized that was kind of a very rushed workshop. I don't know if anybody has has any questions. Yeah.
One question, do these routers in general ever suggest multiple routes and multiple slices for one quantity? Or is it always suggesting to go to one source X?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, do these routers in general always just, are you saying going through like one path, or are you saying do they split?
Yes, because my idea is like if you have a large enough size, it might make sense to split it across different dexes and fire off two trades at the same time to reduce slippage.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's actually what most routers do behind the scenes. So you could imagine, if you have a $10 million buy order from USDC to AVAX, and that's only going through, one route, that's going to have a significant price impact. Whereas if you just split that among, 5 routes or even just 2 routes, it's going to have significantly less impact. So yeah, most routers will do that. I believe 0x and 1inch do that, as does Minima.
And you said earlier in answer to this question that the API simply responds with the routes and doesn't actually execute them. I see here that this was through 0x on the chain. Is this is it just that the route that was suggested was through their exchange?
Yes, so in this case, 0x responds with the transaction payload. And then from the client side, you sign that transaction and send it, and that's how the trade is executed. So 0x just tells you how to do the trade, and then it's up to the user to actually do that trade. Yes?
Quick question. So I noticed, you have to have your wallet connected, in order to find the best route. Is there a possibility to find the route that will be connected?
Um,
Because I would imagine, since you're connected to those APIs, maybe there's more than one route. I would like to see the route and maybe choose myself where to go.
Yes, so the question is if you can get your routes without having your wallet connected. Yes, very much so. I think that's just a gimmick of this quick demo that you need to have your wallet connected. But for example, these APIs, with the exception of 0x, which is going to run some verification before giving you your response, these APIs will just give you a quote without actually taking into respect the address that the quote's going to originate from. All right, if there's no further questions, let me jump back into the Canva. All right, finally, just departing. Good luck, everybody. My co-founder and I are regularly in the kind of office back there. If anybody has any general questions or has questions about Minima. Again, sorry for technical difficulties of this presentation. Hopefully everybody still found it at least somewhat interesting or helpful. You can learn more at nodefinance.org. Thank you.